We're ready.
You're on G66.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. Your new name for our purposes is juror G66. And the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning. And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Please report. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to ask you questions just based on your knowledge of the case.
Okay.
In terms of publicity, so that's what this part is limited to. I had an opportunity to read your questionnaire, what you filled out, and let me make sure I'm reading it correctly. I'm going to read to you what you put down.
Okay.
That you watch from TV First News, TV First News when it happened, the arrest of George Zimmerman, demonstrations in Sanford, arrest of George Zimmerman's wife, pictures on TV of both parties, and you watch the news every day.
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right. Is your main source of information or, from the TV, or is it newspaper too, or?
TV.
And is it both local and national?
Yes, I do
Okay.
watch national.
Do you ever get on the internet, Facebook, or any of that other stuff related to this case? Did you come across any information at all?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's focus on, you were very descriptive in terms of what you knew. And one thing we need from you is a yes or no answer, because we're used to going and saying like that, but the court reporter needs an answer. I know we're used to when we talk, we nod our heads and all that.
Okay, yes, sir.
You don't mind?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I gather you found out about the case from the media at the very beginning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that would have been back in February of last year?
Yes, sir.
Have you kept up with the case just in your daily looking at the news on TV?
No, sir, I wasn't focused on that case. I would just turn on the TV every morning and see what was going on in the world before I went out there.
Gotcha. So it wasn't that you were just focusing on this case, but you just like to watch the news, and if this case happened to be on the news, you would watch it?
Correct,
Is that
yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have any discussions as a result of what you learned from TV with other people? Let's start about with family. Did you have discussions with family about the case?
Yes, sir.
Did any of the family members express an opinion to you about their feelings about the case?
Not opinions. We discussed what happened, but none of us ever came to a conclusion.
Right. So I know you stated you had not formed an opinion as to the defendant's, Mr. Zimmerman's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're saying that when you had discussions with your family, they did not form opinions as to his guilt or innocence either?
No, sir.
Okay. And then you also mentioned, let me backtrack. Did you have any discussions with friends about the case?
A couple friends from Chicago, that's where I'm from, so,
Okay.
but they had no opinion, so.
And was that over the phone, or they come visiting down here in Florida and talk about the case, ask you about the case?
Over the phone.
Okay, so since they knew it happened
Yeah.
in the
Yes,
community
sir.
you lived, they asked you about the case?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay. I'm not going to ask you to give every little bit of detail that you know about the case, but is it fair to say that you're aware that there was pictures, as you mentioned, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you say pictures of both parties, what do you mean by that?
George Zimmerman with his head injuries, Trayvon Martin with his picture with him with his hoodie on. That would be about it.
Sure, okay. Did you form any impressions when you saw the picture of Trayvon Martin with a hoodie on?
No.
Okay.
No.
How about George Zimmerman with injuries?
Felt sorry for him, but I
Okay.
mean,
Sure. Do you recall any other pictures related to the case that you would have seen at all?
of the demonstrations, the protests, on TV, I saw.
Sure. How about any other pictures of potential evidence in the case related to Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Martin, or anything else about the scene or anything like that?
Yes, I did see where I believe the media took
went to the scene and they
Okay.
re-demonstrated what
Okay,
happened. Yes,
sure.
I did see that.
Now, since you're such an avid TV watcher, news, do you always believe what's on the news?
Oh, no,
Why not?
because they're not always truthful, the
Okay.
media. I mean, you can't believe everything you hear.
Okay.
I mean, I've kind of grown up that way. You don't believe everything you hear.
Okay. Now, would you agree that sometimes the media reports the facts, you know, straight facts? Car went down the street. And sometimes they also interject, intentionally or sometimes unintentionally, their opinions about what happened.
I definitely feel they do opinions
Okay.
on what happened.
Sure. And my other point on that is sometimes they even have commentators that kind of debate both points. You know, they have professional people, attorneys, sometimes they have psychologists, psychiatrists, you know, they have all kinds of people talk about the case. Do you remember any such discussions that you watched related to the case where people were given opinions or commentary about the case?
No, sir. A lot of times the TV might be on, but I'm busy,
Sure.
and it's just noise in the house.
Okay. And again, we don't know what you've heard or what you've seen. That's what we're trying to find out. So don't ever apologize in terms of we're just trying to find out what you know.
Okay.
Okay. And if you don't know it, it's perfectly all right to say you don't know.
Okay.
Don't feel like you've got to know everything.
Okay.
Because then we would be here for 5 days you haven't described. We're just trying to get a feel for what you know and what impact, if any, it had on you being able to sit as a juror. Does that make sense, what we're trying
Yes.
to find
Yes,
out?
sir.
Do you remember watching any of the proceedings that happened in court in terms of arguments or anything in front of the court?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you remember anything about any recordings related to the case, if there were any recordings of the case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell me about those as best you can recall.
I remember when it first came out, a neighbor with the telephone conversation with
Okay.
the police department. I did hear that
Sure.
recording. Is that the recording you're trying?
I can't tell you what the recordings are. I just want to know what you know because
Yeah.
we can't feed you the facts and say, oh, what do you think about that? We're trying to get what you know.
I did hear that.
Okay, so I'm not going to acknowledge or not. Based on that recording, you remember recording about a neighbor?
Mhm.
You remember the nature of the recording, what it was, what kind of call it was at all, or the substance of what was in the recording itself?
She had called the police department and was reporting that there was a scuffle outside,
Okay,
and then she heard a shot.
okay. Did you actually listen to the recording itself, or did you just get commentary or a report that there was a recording by a neighbor?
I did hear it, the
Okay.
actual recording on
Okay.
TV.
So you actually heard the recording?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of hearing that recording?
No, sir.
Okay. You also mentioned demonstrations. What do you recall about the demonstrations?
They were protesting downtown Sanford.
Do you
And,
remember?
yeah, that was
Okay.
about it.
Did you feel that the protesting was in favor of one side or another, or what the cause was, if it was a protest, in terms of what the issue was?
Yes, it was at the very beginning when when Mr. George Zimmerman wasn't arrested and they were protesting.
Okay. Did you think that was a good thing, bad thing, or just you didn't have an opinion about it?
I didn't have an opinion about it, you know. I thought the law would take care of, you know.
Did you feel that the protests were disruptive in some way in terms of the community? You know, did you feel that way?
Definitely.
Okay, okay.
Definitely.
If at trial there was no mention of a protest at all, that wasn't an issue in the case, let's assume that. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, and let's assume you sat through the trial. Could you remove that fact or that aspect of what you heard completely from the case and
Yeah.
make your decision only what happens in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
In other words, would you agree that some stuff that comes out on TV is potentially not accurate? Would you
Yes,
agree with
sir.
that?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree that even if it might be accurate, it might not come into evidence, so it should not factor at all in you arriving at a decision?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Here's the problem sometimes we have with jurors. they listen to TV, we live in a great country, we have a freedom of being able, some people hear more than others, and then sometimes you're listening there to the evidence, and you remember things a little differently than what the witness is saying, because somehow in your mind, you remember that TV said something else. And though jurors will say, yeah, I'll put it out of my mind, it comes into your mind, which is normal, that's, and the question is, they try to, but they really can't. Do you understand what I'm saying? My question is, in other words, if you heard from the witness stand, let's pretend, I'm gonna give you a factual scenario doesn't pertain to this case.
Right.
A car, let's say the car was the key piece of evidence in this case. The car doesn't exist in this case, but let me ask you about that. This way, and some witness said the car was red. And then you remember a story about the car being blue. And you were asked to decide back there, the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman. And that was an important key fact. Which one would you rely on in making your decision?
What was said in the courtroom.
Okay, so you could completely, even though it came into your mind, and even though you would go, oh, I thought the car was blue, you could completely, that could vanish from your mind, from your memory.
Yes, sir, because
You also heard, or you've got in here, the arrest of George Zimmerman's wife. Tell me what you recall about that.
I just, on the news about she was arrested, it was due, which I don't know details, due to money
Okay.
that was not presented or told to the court.
Okay.
And that's all I know.
Let's assume that fact was inaccurate. You could disregard it, I'm assuming. But let's assume it was accurate. Let's assume it was. But let's assume it did not come into evidence at all in this case. Can you completely remove that from your decision-making process if that was not relevant? The fact that you know that, is that going to force you to the other as to the defendant's guilt or innocence?
No, sir, I wouldn't.
Okay. What happens if his wife, and I don't know that she will or not, but I'm just making this as hypothetical, what happens if his wife is a witness in the case? Would you believe her to be less credible or more credible because in the back of your mind you knew that you heard that on TV? Do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yeah,
Can you
I
remove that
understand.
from the fact that you heard that she was arrested?
Right.
Okay, so the fact that you heard that, could you remove that from your thought process as to her credibility if that did not come in at all? Now, obviously, if it came in during the trial that she was arrested, then you could factor that in. But let's assume that never came in at trial. Could you remove that in evaluating her testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you believe you can?
Yeah, I believe I can.
Okay, and I'm not trying to get you to say one way or the other. All we're trying to do, both sides, is trying to find out whether people, and we believe people are honest when they're here and talking to them. But we just need to know what you know.
Okay.
And we need to pry a little bit to ask you to think about it. Because once you're a juror and you start thinking about it, then it's too late. You
Correct.
can't say, oh, Judge, hold on, and then we have to remove you from the jury and it messes the whole process up. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does,
So
sir.
you believe you can completely, you heard that, you can completely remove that from your decision-making process. You understand in the law you have to. But
Correct.
in addition to following the law, you actually believe you can?
Yes.
Okay. And then you mentioned that your first impression in terms of you mentioned injuries as to Mr. Zimmerman, you felt sorry. Is that the word you used, I think?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of that he's the one that's culpable, or Trayvon Martin is culpable in terms of, you mentioned a interaction between them, or a struggle, I think, whatever word you use. Do you think that shows one thing or another?
No, sir.
Okay. Can you listen to the evidence and whatever is presented in evidence, make a decision on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I apologize if I've already asked you this. You didn't do any internet search at all or not?
No, sir.
You don't
In
find-
fact, my computer crashed,
Okay,
so,
all right.
no, I did not.
Okay. And you mentioned already friends from Chicago. Anybody
Mhm.
else that you can think of that you spoke about to the case about,
No, sir.
other than family, obviously?
No, sir.
Okay. So you've never expressed an opinion one way or the other in this case?
No, sir.
You didn't express an opinion as to whether he should have been arrested or not?
No, sir.
He being Mr. Zimmerman, I apologize.
No, sir.
Did you express an opinion as to whether Miss Zimmerman should have been arrested or not?
No, sir.
Okay. One other area that we need to explore is when you filled out the questionnaire, the questionnaire said it is expected that the trial will be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. We have now, as best we can, estimated the trial will actually, once we pick the jury and we start a trial, it will be 2 to 4 weeks. And the judge has also made a determination because of the media. She wants to make sure that the jurors are not in any way contacted by the media. There's not some problem with the media in terms of exposure, that the jury will be sequestered. So I need to ask you about that. Sequester means that jurors will be kept apart, and the ability to interact with other people will be severely limited. We all realize it's a hardship. If you talk to anybody, you know, who wants to be subject to that? Nobody in the case. The attorneys, nobody. But it's part of what we all agree as citizens of this great country that we want to, if we want to serve as jurors. So my question to you with that background is to ask you, now that you know that the trial is to be expected to be 2 to 4 weeks, and the fact that you know that the jury will be sequestered, does that present an insurmountable hardship? You know, it's a hardship for everybody, but it's an insurmountable. You know, do you have, God forbid, a relative that's got some major surgery, 3 weeks from now, and you follow me? Is there something in your life, or is there some issue that you think will present a burden or a hurdle that you have to overcome that you cannot?
No, sir.
Okay, so you're amenable to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else you think it would be important for the judge or the attorneys at this time to know about your feelings about the case at this time that you think would interfere with you being able to sit as a juror?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm a pretty upfront person.
Okay, and I wasn't implying that you were. Okay. So at this time, you can be fair to both sides. In other words, you have not formulated an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman?
No, I have not formed an opinion on either one.
Okay. If I could have a moment, Your Honor.
Mr. Mayor?
I neglected to ask you about, in terms of the demonstrations you mentioned that they were disruptive in your mind. And when you say they're disruptive, what did you mean by that?
Trying to go downtown Stanford to eat.
Okay.
And, I'm new to the area, so
Okay,
Yeah.
so it interfered with you being able to go to a certain
Explore.
restaurant at a certain time?
yes, sir.
Now, did you attribute those demonstrations to any particular party in terms of either Mr. Zimmerman or Mr. Trayvon Martin? Did you attribute it to one side or the other?
I was contributing it to Trayvon Martin's
Okay.
side.
As a result of that, because you couldn't go to a restaurant on one day or however many days you
Right.
couldn't, would you hold that against the state of Florida since we're prosecuting Mr. Zimmerman?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm assuming, would you hold it against Mr. Zimmerman?
No, sir.
Okay. So you feel you can completely disregard, you do believe in people's right, free speech and such?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're not going to hold that against one side or the other?
No,
Or
sir.
are you?
No, sir.
Okay, this is the time to tell because you were frustrated that day not being able to eat, I'm assuming.
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Hi.
Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning.
It is already, isn't it? My name is Don West. I'm one of the attorneys for George Zimmerman that you see over here. And of course, this is Mark O'Mara, co-counsel on the case. We've been taking turns with the jurors. As you may have figured out by now, we're asking the jurors to come in one by one at this point to ask questions that are sort of focused on the media exposure that any juror, of course including yourself, might have to the case. There will be more questioning later, just so you know that we're not trying to cover everything today. So I might even jump around a little bit with the questions I ask, maybe follow up on something rather than doing it all over again. Is that okay?
That's correct. That's fine.
Um,
Take a deep breath.
Yeah, and if you don't know what I'm getting at, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know what you mean, because usually that's my mistake. So I'm happy to start over again.
Okay.
So, I understand that you are retired.
Yes, sir.
How recent?
2011.
And is that why you now live here in Central Florida?
Yes, sir.
When did you move to Central Florida?
June of 2011.
Doing the quick math, I guess that's 7 or 8 months before this event occurred.
Yes, sir.
Just for a frame of reference, this is the shooting.
Yes, sir.
Was on February 26, 2012, just as a marker in time. Okay. Have you been retired since moving to the area completely?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of that, is that why you have maybe more time than others to pay attention to the news?
Every morning I wake up, that's the first thing I do is turn on the news. I've always done that even when I worked while I'm getting ready.
Uh-huh.
So I've always looked at the news every day.
You're someone that just pays attention to what's going on?
Yes, sir.
And I assume that continues every day still?
Yes, sir.
What would your primary sources of news be from this area?
Channel 13, my bright house, automatically when I turn the TV on, does 13.
And do you usually leave that on until there's some reason to change the channel?
I change the channel when they start repeating themselves. So I'll go to another channel, or I'll go to, depends what time of the day it is, you know. I'll go to another channel.
Might you have several different channels on during the course of the day?
I would probably have 2, maybe 3 news channels I might click through toward the evening.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, Channel 13 is a local,
Correct.
Local news. It's with Bright House, right?
Correct.
And how about the other stations that you sometimes turn to?
Channel 6,
Mm-hmm.
I'll listen to. Sometimes I'll go on CNN.
More of a national news
Yes,
presence.
yes.
Channel 6 is the local station.
Correct.
So do I understand that the majority of the time that you're watching the news is likely to be from a local news provider rather than one of the national cable networks?
Correct, it's local.
How about the newspaper? Do you get any newspapers?
I just started getting the newspaper, I would say 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Which paper is that?
Sentinel?
Is it the local Orlando paper?
Yes, the Orlando paper.
The Orlando Sentinel?
Yes, yes, sir.
And that was, what, the beginning of the month or sometime in May, maybe?
In May, yes, sir.
Up until that point, did you have any other regular newspapers that you would view either hard copy or perhaps online?
No, sir.
Most of the time then, until you got the Sentinel, it would have been television news that you were exposed to.
Yes, sir.
Any internet news sites that you like in particular?
No, sir.
Do you ever browse the headlines online with some of the major news sites?
No, sir.
Would you, I'm trying to sort of think ahead, are you saying basically your knowledge of this case then through the news would be from primarily Channel 13, maybe Channel, was it 6?
6.
And whatever CNN may have shown from time to time?
I don't believe I even saw this case on CNN. It's been on the local news only.
Do you watch the cable news programs in the evening that are hosted by individuals? Anderson Cooper, for example, on CNN.
No, sir.
So you haven't then watched programs that have been specifically designed around the case?
No, sir.
And on Channel 13, I know that they've covered the case extensively, but they've also broadcast some of the hearings in the case. Do you know if you've come across any of the hearings?
No, I have not come, no, sir.
Is there any way that you could estimate, and I mean only that, maybe the number of times overall that you've seen or read something or talked to somebody in some way about the case?
12 times, maybe?
Mhm. 12 times where you, and I know this is completely an estimate, but 12
Mhm.
times where you may have looked at some specific aspect of the case,
Yes.
or it's something that caught your attention?
Something that probably caught my attention as I'm zipping through the house. You
Sure.
know,
Mhm.
I don't sit exactly in front of the TV and watch the news, because I'm just kind of a busy person all the time.
Retired people are a lot busier than
Yeah.
you thought they would be, I suppose.
Yeah, I babysit my little 2.5-year-old grandson, so
Uh-huh.
we watch Barney and other shows.
I bet you're tired of hearing that theme song.
Yes.
Is there anything, or could you identify anything else than what you've said right here in your summary description about the case that stands out in your mind as being something that caught your attention? Not that you necessarily think it's important, but if you do, that's fine too.
No, sir.
I know you mentioned that you had seen a picture of George Zimmerman,
Correct.
and a picture of him. Describe that picture, I'm sorry.
I believe it was the back of his head, and there was blood on the back of his head.
Have you heard anything in the news about Trayvon Martin, or Trayvon Martin's background?
Yes, sir.
Would you describe generally what that is?
I heard he was from Miami. I believe he was 17 years old. He's from Miami. Came and lived with his father. That his mother was having some trouble. And that's about it. I mean,
Did you
oh, I also heard that on the internet or his phone, I did hear that about the pictures he had on his phone.
Mhm. Would that have been from one of those news sources that you talked about?
Correct, yes,
As opposed to a conversation you had with somebody?
yes.
Did you understand that Mr. Martin was visiting here rather than living here?
I didn't know he was living here permanently or visiting. No, I didn't know. I didn't know that.
And as Mr. DeLoreanda was mentioning to you, what is one of the important aspects of what we're doing now, not just finding out what you know, but whether or not, once you've figured out what you know connected with this case, whether as a juror you would be able to disregard it and make a decision based only on the evidence in the case.
Yes, sir. I
Do you
would
see
be
what I'm
able to.
getting at?
Yes.
And you feel like you can?
Yes, sir.
There was this, Mr. DeLoreanda used the term vanish, as if you could make your memory vanish. I want to clarify, no one expects you not to remember something, that you can somehow flip a switch and all of a sudden the memory is gone. So that's not what we're asking, okay?
Yes, sir.
What we're asking is, even if you remember something about the case, whether or not you can set it aside so as not to bring it into the trial with you. So far, so good?
So far, so good.
Okay. Because some of the things that you may have heard may be true, may not be true, and may not in any way appear in the case itself.
Yes, sir, I understand
And
that.
do you think that you're capable of sorting that out and applying only the evidence in the courtroom in your decision, whatever that would be?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In that regard, do you remember anything else about George Zimmerman that impressed you, meaning a memory that stuck with you or stands out, connected with this case?
No, sir.
How about Trayvon Martin? You mentioned a couple of things that would be sort of background information. Remember anything else other than, I think you talked about where he was from and why he was here, maybe some pictures. Anything else?
No, sir.
Let's talk, let me shift gears, I said I would do that, about the demonstrations
Yes,
that
sir.
you were aware of. Remind me, did you have an impression as to why the demonstrations took place?
Yes, sir.
And what was that?
My impression was that they were protesting because Mr. Zimmerman was not arrested for the shooting.
Mhm. Well, you know he was arrested, obviously.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Yeah,
so are we talking about this window of
This
time?
is, right, when it happened up to his arrest.
Uh-huh. When you knew about the demonstrations from that perspective,
Mhm.
how did that make you feel?
Really had no opinion on that. The law is gonna take care of, I don't know the details, so the law would,
Did you form any opinion, is what I'm getting at?
did I? No.
Did you form any opinion about whether or not he should have been arrested?
No.
Did you form any opinion about whether the investigating agency, the Sanford Police Department, had done anything wrong by not arresting him sooner?
No.
When you say let the law take care of it, what did you mean by that?
They know more than I do sitting there watching it, so, I don't know the details.
Is that what you mean when you say if you don't know the details about something, you don't necessarily want to weigh in on what should or shouldn't happen?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Were you aware of anything occurring around the time of the protests directly in connection with George Zimmerman, whether he in some way was being singled out?
Could you say that in another way?
Mm-hmm. Would you agree that the community was pretty divided around this time in
Yes.
connection with the case?
Yes.
And did you hear anything in the news whether there was some racial aspect to that division?
Yes.
What did you understand the division to be based on?
Because of the white-black
Mhm.
situation,
Like I said, there's no right or wrong answers. We're just
Right.
trying to figure out what you know and what, if any, impact it had.
I just felt like it turned into a racial situation because of the nationalities of the parties.
The races of Mr. Zimmerman
Yeah.
and Mr. Martin being
Yes, sir.
white and black.
Yes.
Anything about the case that you heard in the news, and I don't mean the demonstrations, but
Mhm.
the evidence or the discussion of what the evidence might be that makes you think it was a race-based event?
No, no, sir.
Have you heard anything about the circumstances of the event in the context of self-defense?
No, sir.
What I mean is, have you heard whether or not Mr. Zimmerman is making a claim of self-defense through your exposure to the media?
Yes, I heard that. Yes, sir.
With that frame of reference, if you would, have you heard anything in the media that gives you an impression whether or not the shooting of Trayvon Martin was in self-defense?
No, sir. Can
We're-
you?
Sure. I'm sort of asking you to sort of remember what you've heard, since you've not heard any evidence. Just remember what you've heard out there. And I'm asking you sort of what impact it had on you, what impression it had, and whether or not, based on that publicity, if you have an impression whether or not the shooting of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman was in self-defense.
No, sir.
Would you be able to make a decision in this case then based only on the evidence that's presented to disregard what other evidence in favor of self-defense or perhaps against self-defense that you may think of that you heard prior to coming into the trial?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I assume that you did not attend any of the events?
No, sir.
Has the case been discussed at any church or social organization that you belong to?
No, sir.
Have any of your friends or family made comments about the case to you on social media?
No, sir.
The recording that that Mr. De La Grande mentioned to you, I want to be careful that I don't add any information that you haven't already talked about. So we're talking about a recording made from a resident to the 911 system?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is there anything about that call that caught your attention in terms of background sounds?
Just the shot.
Anything about that other than the shot leading up to it?
Well, the person on the phone, the franticness of her voice, and the yelling.
Okay.
And then the shot.
I guess we're talking about the same call then. Are you
Okay.
saying that you heard a call that had some yelling in the background?
Yes, sir.
How would you characterize the yelling?
Characterize it. Somebody was in need of help. Is that
Yelling as opposed to talking?
right? Yelling. Yes.
And did you form any opinion after listening to that recording how many people may have been yelling?
No, I didn't form an opinion. No.
Did you form any opinion as to who the person or persons may have been that were yelling?
I assumed, I assume maybe it was George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin. That's what I assumed.
Okay, so you have no reason to think that it could have been somebody other than those two.
No.
As between the two, Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, have you formed any impression or hold any opinion as to which one of them may have been screaming?
No, sir. Not at all.
Have you seen anything in the news or anything on Channel 13 in particular in connection with this case and that recording regarding who was yelling for help?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any issues that are currently being considered by the judge on any matter, including that?
No, sir.
Are you aware of any decisions that the judge has already made in the case up until now from watching the news?
No, sir.
I'm gonna grab my water. If you care for some.
No, thank you.
I've just been told to sit down, and I think I'll take the direction. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please remain seated there. When council's ready, please approach. Very much. Please be seated, everybody, and, sir,
Yes.
good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You're going to continue to be referred to as juror G81.
Okay.
And the purpose for today is the attorneys are going to ask you questions about the questionnaire you filled out on Tuesday morning.
Okay.
And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Okay.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
As Judge Nelson indicated, we're limited in this part of the jury selection process in terms of your exposure to the media, so that's what we're focusing on at this time. You put on here on different TV, you got your source from different TV news outlets, and you heard about the shooting, the disagreement between those, and then nationally and locally about how the incident was handled and how the governor stepped in to appoint or to name a special prosecutor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions related to that.
Okay.
It was your exposure to this case in terms of information from outside sources limited to the TV, or did you also get it from the newspaper?
No, just TV.
Okay. And you mentioned, was that local and national?
Yes.
Okay. Locally, do you recall what channels or what stations?
Channel 9,
Okay. And how about nationally?
MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. Those were the news stations.
So you cover the whole,
Mhm.
okay. Is there one you favored more than other in terms of the national news?
National, I would say MSNBC.
Okay. And did you do any internet search related to this case?
It would pop up on Yahoo.
Okay.
When you go on, you'll see a
Sure.
story about it.
Okay. How about through Facebook or anything like that?
No.
Okay. And I may have incorrectly asked you a question. Let me make sure you understand my question in terms of the internet. Some people do their own, they live in a community and they do research, see what else they can find out that the news, local news isn't giving them. And then some people just happen, while they're doing Facebook or whatever, happen to, it pops up. Would you have been the type that just, I gather you heard about the case, and was that at the very beginning of when it happened back in February, or was it more recently, or is it throughout the period of between February last year and today?
I would say it was more so at the beginning when it became a big news story about a month after it happened. And then to this time, it became more in the news that I would hear about things.
Sure. And what I'm trying to ask is, sometimes news happens in our community, in the community, and then people pay attention to it, but it happens, it's another news story. And then some people, addiction may be the wrong word, but they kind of, gravitate to that story, and anytime it comes up, they're pulling it up.
Mm-hmm.
If those two options I would give you, which one would you be the type that just periodically, or?
Periodic.
Okay, so it wasn't that you were obsessed with the case where every time you'd have to go
No.
look at it, couldn't miss dinner or whatever because you had to watch that program come on about that?
No, that's not me.
Okay, all right. In terms of the case itself, did you pay attention to any of the court proceedings that occurred in the case from the very beginning towards, up to today? Today I should say because you've already been sworn as jury not to talk. I'm talking about prior to coming Monday.
No. I would say no.
Okay. Do you recall photographs, any photographs that you would have seen on TV or on the internet regarding to the case?
Yes.
And would you have seen photographs, do you remember what they depicted at all?
I saw photographs of the deceased. I saw photographs of the defendant, photographs of the area in which it happened in.
Okay, so you would have had photographs of Trayvon Martin, and then also photographs of George Zimmerman. Is that? And I know we get used to when we speak and to
Yes.
people, we use, you know what I'm talking
Yes.
about. Court reporter's got to type in a yes or no because we want to make sure it's accurate. I can tell you're saying yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
And you're not the first juror that's done that. We're used to doing that, so I'm not trying to pick on you. Regarding the photographs of Mr. Zimmerman, what do you recall of the photograph or photographs of him that you saw, what they depicted? Do you remember off the top of your head what they showed?
The photograph that I remember when he was arrested, his mugshot, I guess.
Okay.
they say.
And what did that look like? Because
I just remember the orange jumpsuit.
Okay. Do you remember any other photographs of Mr. Zimmerman?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, of Trayvon Martin, what photographs do you remember of Trayvon Martin?
One that sticks out is the one that I think he had like a burgundy type shirt.
Okay.
Him smiling.
Okay.
It's a kid picture.
Sure. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of seeing any of the two photographs? Okay.
No.
Just one individual and another
Yeah,
individual?
just two
somebody arrested?
individuals in a situation that occurred.
Okay. You mentioned disagreement, and now you've used the word situation. Did you come to any conclusion based on what you saw on TV or read perhaps in Yahoo about what actually occurred in terms of what's positive that occurred out there?
I would say no, because the fact that it had to have so long before an arrest came, it doesn't seem like there's a conclusion to make until all of the evidence is presented in a court case.
Okay. You mentioned in your notation here that the governor stepped in to name a special prosecutor.
Yes.
What were your impressions regarding that?
The thing that particular, when Governor Stott did that, is that I guess he felt, as the governor of the state of Florida, this whole situation was looking bad, and so because he may have felt that Seminole County, the DA in Seminole County was dropping the ball, that he would bring someone else from the outside to look into the matter.
Okay. Would you hold that against the state of Florida, the fact that we were appointed in this case? Would you hold that against us? Would you hold that against Mr. Zimmerman? The fact that Governor Scott appointed a special prosecutor, my boss, Ms. Corey, on the case. Would you hold that against Mr. Zimmerman?
No.
Okay. Would that factor in any way in your decision as to determining whether this defendant, Mr. Zimmerman, is guilty or not guilty?
No.
Okay. So that doesn't factor at all in terms of whether he's innocent or guilty?
No, sir.
Okay. You understand that that cannot factor in at all?
Correct.
Is there any dispute in your mind that you can be fair as to that?
There's no dispute.
Okay. You also, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but you stated in your question here, or your answer, I should say, is that you have not formed an opinion as to Mr. Zimmerman's guilt or innocence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you understand that you may have seen stuff on TV? Let me backtrack a second. Do you always believe what's on the news?
No.
Okay. Do you think they always get it right?
Definitely not.
Do you think sometimes the news could be biased one way or the other?
Yes.
Okay. In this particular case, do you think the news was biased in favor of Trayvon Martin or in favor of George Zimmerman, or depending on which news station? Or I'll shut up and let you talk. Sorry.
To me, it seems as though the pendulum changes with the news media. At first, it seemed as though they had maybe a bias against the defendant, but then later on, it seemed as though they had a bias against the deceased. So.
Okay. As a result, was your opinion first in favor of Trayvon Martin, or if you had one, and then was it later switched in favor of George Zimmerman? I mean, did you follow the trend or the bias in the media?
No.
Okay. Did you keep an open mind throughout, or did you kind of form an opinion? And it's all right for people to form opinions. The question is, did you form one and then change it as you're going along, or?
No, I would say it's pretty much been the same, just until the evidence comes out, all of the evidence, and typically don't get that until you're in a court.
Okay. So you understand the basic concept that we all agree to live by in this great country that we live in, that there potentially is a trial, there is a trial here, that's
Correct.
where all the evidence comes out, not what the media says or what people say.
Yes, that's
Do you
true.
agree with that concept?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, let's talk about, aside from your exposure to the media, did you get any comments out there in the community, either friends or family, that talked about the case to you?
Yes, and friends and family talked to me about it.
And did they express their opinions about the case?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Were those opinions one-sided in favor of George Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin, or was it a combination? Or tell me a little bit about that.
It was a combination. There were some that felt that that Trayvon, what happened to him was tragic, and then there were some that felt that what happened to Trayvon, that is typical in their minds and their opinions.
Okay. So, how about in terms of was kind of connected to the case? Was it? Do you remember any of that from the media aspect of it?
I know there was when there was a rally down in Sanford, there was one news report I saw, a local business owner that was concerned about how this was making Sanford, the city of Sanford, look.
Okay. Did you attend that rally at all?
No.
Okay. What were your feelings about the rally? Did you think that was a good thing, bad thing, or just people exercising their free speech rights?
People exercising their rights of free speech.
Okay. Did you feel that rally was, it came about because of people in this community or people from outside the community? Or do you know?
From what I saw, it seemed like it came from people, a mixture both in the community that wanted help, and they asked people from outside.
Okay. My question is, as a result of that rally, did you think that would that cause you, one way or the other, in support of Trayvon Martin or in support of George Zimmerman? Did you think, some people might think that was a bad thing, some people think it's a good thing? Where are you on that in terms of the rally?
So far as my opinions about
Yes,
the
sir.
rally, no opinion on it. Like I said, there's people exercising their free right. We've had throughout our history people demonstrating
Yes, sir.
when they felt there was injustice. So that's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily something that should,
Okay.
you know, reflect badly on anyone.
Did you talk to people in terms of friends or family that had opinions one way or the other? Did you get into any of those arguments? I'm not saying there were arguments or discussions about what was going on about that?
I talked to him about the fact that where it happened, the fact that it happened in Sanford where I reside, and so far as the case or whether it was right or wrong, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and that opinion is most of the time based off their perspective. They really can't, I feel they really can't judge until they know the full evidence.
Is that what you told people?
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I apologize. Okay. The other aspect I guess I want to cover in terms of questioning is when you filled out the questionnaire, you said there was not an insurmountable hardship in terms of taking time. And let me backtrack a second about that. Let me give you some context. We all realize that when we ask people to serve as jurors,
Right.
that it's a hardship. I mean, unless you don't have anything else to do in the world, most people have a life in the sense of what I mean by either job or family or other matters that are going on in their lives. So we realize it's out of the ordinary. But we all realize that as we live as being citizens of this great country, we all have to, if we can, partake in the system. The system doesn't work unless people take time from their lives.
Correct.
And so what we're asking is, and the court has made a determination that this trial will actually take anywhere from, we're estimating, 2 to 4 weeks. That's after we pick a jury. You know, we're still in the jury selection process. And the court has also determined that to keep the media from having an influence on the jurors, or anybody having an influence on the jurors are going to be sequestered. With those two factors, the fact that it may take up to 4 weeks, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and that the jury will be sequestered, does that present an insurmountable hardship that you're not going to be able to participate in this?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. So you're agreeing that you can take time from your everyday lives to participate in this?
It's
Okay.
as good a time as any, yes.
I apologize if I have, your main resource or contact in terms of the internet would have been through Yahoo, you said?
Yes.
Okay. You don't do any, I guess it's tweet or twitting or
Oh,
whatever
tweet.
they call it? Twitter?
No.
Okay, you don't do that at all,
No.
you're shaking your head, okay.
No.
And Yahoo, this is how much I know about this subject, so I need you to educate me. In Yahoo, apparently, as through all these social media, there is, I guess, is there an opportunity for people to comment about a certain situation such as what happened here?
If they click on a story that's written by a Yahoo writer, down at the bottom there's chances for people to make comments on different stories.
And would you, not that you did it religiously, but did you sometimes look at those comments?
No.
You never did?
No.
Why is that?
Because I find that people that tend to make comments on the internet typically they're almost very mean-spirited, In the comments that they make, a lot of times the comments won't have anything to do about the story, and that's not really a way I choose to spend a lot of my time.
Okay. And I gather, you didn't comment at all about the story at any time?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. Because sometimes people can comment anonymously, you know,
Mhm.
you never find out, and all we're trying to find out is if you did. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it, we just need to know if you did.
Right,
You don't, off the top of your head, you don't remember doing it?
correct.
Okay. And I think I covered this already, but discussions with family or friends, you've had discussions, but they have not impacted you to the way that you, caused you to form an opinion one way or the other in this case?
That's correct.
Okay, in other words, your opinion is still the same, that you can agree that Mr. Zimmerman is entitled to a trial,
Correct.
correct? And you have not formulated an opinion regarding his guilt or innocence?
Correct.
You're agreeing to listen to all the evidence?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you picked a jury, you get to sit in one of those chairs inside that box, you're listening to the evidence, and as you're listening to it, you say, God, wasn't there a story in Yahoo, or didn't somebody comment on TV that it's a little different than what I'm hearing that witness say? You understand under the law that you cannot consider that evidence?
That's correct.
You understand
I
that's not
understand
evidence.
that.
The fact that you remember something from TV, unless it comes out in this courtroom where everybody's present, the defense, the state, and the judge cannot factor in. We're not asking you to release it, but you can't factor that in.
I understand.
Do you have any problems about being able to do that?
No,
Are you one of those jurors that said, man, this is my opportunity to get fame and become a juror, and then I'll write a book or 20 after this? Is that the reason why you're here?
no.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. O'Meara.
Afternoon, sir. How
Good
are you?
afternoon. Good
My name
afternoon.
is Mark O'Meara, representing Mr. Zimmerman, right there in the middle. And then Don West is on the far end, co-counsel, and also Robert Hirschman is helping me out here today.
Okay.
The whole purpose for this is if we could just walk in and say to you, do you promise to leave everything you heard outside the case, outside the case? Answer that, yes, we should be done. But being lawyers, we can take one question and turn it into a few dozen, and we've been doing that for the last couple of days. So we're going to try and move it along, but what we're really trying to do is to get that stuff that you do know about the case on the table, because we'd rather find out about it now than for you to think about it or remember it as you're sitting on the jury.
Right.
And then having a concern with that and maybe not knowing how to best address it. So that's going to be the purpose for my inquiries here today, okay?
Okay.
I didn't take, the notes that I took were Channel 9 is sort of your go-to station locally, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then NBC, CNN, and Fox News are your go-to stations nationally, with MSNBC being the main one?
Correct.
Okay. What are the particular programs you watch on Channel 9?
I'm sorry?
On Channel 9, particular programs that you watch?
You mean like TV shows or news shows?
No, news, how you get your news.
Just Channel 9 in the mornings when I wake up, or in the afternoon if I make it home in time, I'll turn it on.
Okay. And CNN, any particular programs?
No,
No.
just when I flip, as I channel surf, that'll be
Whatever
when it-
might be on.
Yes.
How about MSNBC, any of those programs of any particular?
The Ed Show. I was trying to remember the name. The
Ed,
Show.
ED, Ed
ED.
Show? Yeah. And on Fox News, anyone in particular?
O'Reilly.
He has commented about this case a number of times. Have you seen any of those?
I saw one when it first came out. I was trying to remember exactly what it was that he said, and I didn't remember. Been thinking about that over the past week, I would say.
Okay. Anything that sticks out in your mind as to what he said about this case?
No, it doesn't.
And then Mr. DeLeon also asked you about your internet searching, and I was confused as I was writing it down, because I thought it went that you do look at Yahoo sometimes
Mhm.
for just the general news. And it's not actually social media as much as it is just a internet source for information, including news, correct?
That's correct.
And that you would sort of watch it, and on occasion would just see whatever either pops up,
Yes,
take a
when-
look at it?
Yes, when you pull up Yahoo, I do searches on Yahoo, so I'll use their search engine. But when you put it in, they have this bar where they have like top news stories that you can continue to click. And when this case became big, that was typically one of the stories that was under that search bar.
Right. I think they have a search bar. AOL has windows, 10 or 15 or 20 windows you can sort of scroll through.
Correct.
Can you remember any of these stories when, and I'm going now back in time to February of 2012 and thereafter, the event happened on the 26th of February, so.
Okay.
Can you remember any particular stories that caught your attention about this case back when it was first breaking news?
The fact that it happened, the fact that there was a stand your ground law that was being talked about here in the state of Florida, news stories about the rally that was occurring.
Okay, let's go through those a little bit. Do you remember them saying anything or focusing on the individuals involved, Mr. Zimmerman and Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Tell me about what you noticed of that.
They seem to center on the fact that there was a disagreement, there was a fight, a lot of conversation about what happened there at the on the grounds of the complex. There was also conversation of whether or not Florida's stand your ground law was one that should it be permissible, should it not be permissible? Other states that have laws that are similar to that, was this a case that fell up under it? Those were the topics of those stories.
Okay. Having then had that awareness of those stories, could you tell which way the media was presenting it?
Yes.
And how is that?
At first, it was almost like a shock that a young man was shot and killed, and that the fact that it could possibly be permissible here in the state of Florida under the law.
So that though the tragedy occurred, it might be allowable under our laws.
Correct.
And that was based upon the finding that though it might be a tragedy, that George Zimmerman had acted appropriately under our laws in defending himself?
Those stories, that's what they were talking about, yes.
What was, having then listened just to that portion of the media, what opinion did you form in regard to the stand your ground, self-defense concept and how it applied to this, the facts of this case?
What it seemed to me is though there was a law, but there was a lot of questions about that particular law. So I didn't know if there was something that the news media was not reporting, something that could only come out in a trial to know, the evidence as to what went on.
Did you have just any gut reaction to how that law should or shouldn't apply, or your thought as to its just general fairness?
Not to the law per se. My gut reaction is the fact that it was a tragedy. Someone lost their life, and someone now was going to have to end up going through at least the media and maybe a court trial to determine if that person was guilty of anything or if they followed the law. So that was my initial gut reaction, just sadness.
Okay. And then as it sort of went along, I think you mentioned that you were aware of some of the rallies that were held.
Yes.
Tell me, when I say when, not weeks or months particularly, but when in the relation to when you first heard about this event, did you find out about rallies?
I found out about the rallies, I would say through MSNBC, and then through local media, that they were planning a rally, where the rally was going to be located, things of that nature.
And when you first heard about that on MSNBC, what was your initial reaction?
I would say my initial reaction was, there's people that feel an injustice has been done, and they want to speak out about that injustice to see if they can gather support, maybe for a prosecution.
Mhm. Any concern that you have with that, or any, did you think it was a good idea, bad idea, in the middle? Any insight that you had on it?
No concern. I would say I was in the middle regarding that.
Do you know any of the people from out of state who were championing that rally or moving it forward?
Yes, I've heard some of the names of the people who were coming in for that.
And who was that?
Reverend Al Sharpton?
Anyone else you can recall?
No. No.
I know that he has a show on MSNBC. Have you watched him or his show on MSNBC?
Comes on kind of early for me. I typically don't get home in time to see that show.
Okay. Have you watched any of it?
I've caught bits and pieces in the past during the elections, presidential elections.
Have you had enough of an opportunity to view his shows or hear him speak or anything to have an opinion as to what his thoughts were on the case?
I would say yes.
And what do you know those to be?
From what I gather, he seems as though this has been an injustice that happened to Trayvon, and that at the least there should be, I would say, a trial to determine if the stand your ground law was applied correctly.
Have you had conversations with other people, and sort of the groups being your friends, your family, your co-workers, in regard to this case?
Yes, we've had discussions about it.
And I know that you talked briefly to Mr. DeLeon about that. I just want to ask a few more questions about that. Speaking to your family, if you could sort of give me an overview of those conversations.
My family is mostly out of this city, out of this area. They come up to visit once before. The conversations I had with them is, and they're also from Miami as well as I am. So they talked to me about the situation, the fact that he was from Miami, the fact that it happened near where I live, near a place where I actually took them to the park that's basically across the street from the apartment complex. The fact that that happened, and you know, it was sad, the fact that they were having rallies up here, and that eventually when it was determined that there was going to be a trial here, let them know about that. So more of me, with my family, more of me telling them what was going on up here.
Your family's interested in when the trial is going to occur?
I wouldn't know if it's necessarily interested, but it's just one of those things that we talk about, seeing the common bonds I guess we all share in this case.
Because your family is actually from that area, right?
Yeah, I'm actually from that area originally.
And is that in an area very close to where Trayvon Martin's family is?
That I don't know.
Okay. Do you know if your family has plans to come up here
No.
for any part of the trial?
No, they don't.
Other members of, or did you speak to any other members of the family about this matter?
My grandmother, and that's it.
Okay. Tell me generally, what is your family's perspective on this case?
The fact that it was sad that a young man lost his life, and the fact that the entire, I guess, sort of media circus that surrounded the entire case.
Do you believe that media circus focused on the racial differences between George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin at all?
To a degree, yes.
In what way?
The fact that Trayvon was African American, the fact that he was shot, it seemed to them, and it seemed to me at a time, that they were bringing up the fact that there's a black man being shot by someone that's not black. Is this something that it's bigger than, you know, the shootings that happen all over this country towards black males.
Is it, in effect, is it something that is particularly racially motivated? Was that the issue of concern?
With my family,
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's what we were talking about. Within the context of your conversations with them, I said, well, were there conversations wrapped around the media presenting this as a racial event?
no, I don't think more so than the fact that someone that's, you know, that's a teenager, lost his life. That's more what they're focused on.
Okay. In addition to your family, how about conversations with your friends in regards to this case?
Very, once again, about the area that we live in, the fact that it's so close to that area, something like that went on, and the fact I don't have many friends. The one friend I do consider a friend, the fact that we talked about the night that it happened, we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear helicopters, we didn't hear cops, we didn't hear anything about it until a couple weeks later, that something so big happened just down the street from us.
When you say you didn't hear helicopters, obviously we're being cautious with your demographics, information, name and address and whatnot.
Correct.
But having said that, are you close enough to where this happened that had there been helicopters, you would have expected to hear them?
Yes.
Within half a mile?
Yes.
Less than that?
Yes.
I know you mentioned you're taking your family to the park right across the street from where this happened, right?
Correct.
If I were to ask you on a percentage basis in your conversations with your family and friends, did they have opinions as to whether this was more George Zimmerman's fault and more Trayvon Martin's fault? What would those percentages be?
That I don't know. It's because when we talk about it, it's almost as though they're not blaming anyone in the scenario. They're not seeking fault or to find fault in the scenario. It's just, it's a news event that is particularly close to them.
And by close to them, you mean what we've talked about already?
Yes.
Some of the issues and not only the fact of what happened, and also, would that also include some of the concerns as to whether or not it was perceived as a racially motivated event?
Correct.
And that's the connection that your family and friends would have
That,
to it?
the fact that Trayvon's from Miami, we're from Miami, the fact that I live in Sanford, the fact that they visited, the fact that they, I don't know if they remember the complex where this happened, but the fact that they were close to it and they remember, they might have remembered, oh yeah, I remember that complex over there.
Do you think the media has presented Sanford in such a way that it's now divided because of this event?
Yes, I would say the way they presented it, they have, but by the same token, I don't know if it's something that has already been in Sanford.
That the divide has been in Sanford and this exposed it? Or?
Yes.
Okay. How do you, along what lines do you think the media has presented the division?
I think the media has presented it as though the African American residents of Sanford are untrustworthy of anyone else that lives in Sanford, and that there's constant friction between those two groups. I think that's what they portrayed.
How has that media presentation affected your opinion of the case?
None.
Again, we know some of your information from your demographics, so that I know that you're involved in education.
Correct.
And has the media presentation of this event had a carryover effect to the way students and other administrators have reacted to it?
I would say no.
Not at all.
Not in the school that I work in, no.
Well, more generally, only if your opinion is different, more generally, do you have an opinion regarding whether or not the media coverage of this has affected youth in the Sanford or Seminole County area?
I would say no.
The pictures that you said that you had seen about this, I think, were few, and they were one of George Zimmerman. You identified it as a mugshot with an orange jumper, I think?
Correct.
Okay. And then Trayvon Martin, you saw in a burgundy shirt. Can you describe that a bit better for me?
If I remember correctly, it was burgundy, short sleeve. I want to say it had Hollister written across the chest.
I think you said that he was smiling.
Yes.
Anything else about that photograph?
No.
Did you get it? I asked you to guess how old you thought Trayvon Martin was in that photograph.
14, 15.
Any other photographs that you've seen? Let me prompt it maybe a bit this way. There have been some other photographs talking about that have been released. The first photograph of George Zimmerman was released. You've identified that as a mugshot. There were other photographs specific to him and other physical characteristics that he had. Does that bring to mind any other photographs that you may have seen over the past year and a half?
No.
And then there were other photographs released regarding Trayvon Martin, regarding other matters, and more current photographs maybe of him. Have you seen any of those?
No.
So the only two photographs you can recall are the two we've talked about.
Correct.
What about videos? Any type of videos or anything like that that you've seen?
I think early on there was a video of the grounds where the altercation and shooting took place. I just vaguely remember. That's the only video I remember.
Was George Zimmerman in that video?
That I don't remember.
Okay. And you said that there were different perspectives that people had on this event, and I think that you said that one was in regards to Trayvon, that it was Trayvon Martin, that it was tragic. Tell me where you got that information from, or a little bit more depth on that, if you would.
When I talk about perspectives, one thing that I've discovered in my life is people see things based off their perspective, either their background knowledge, their experiences that they've had. They bring those to different situations, and from time to time, they'll use those to color a current situation. That's what I mean so far as perspective. What was the second part of that question you asked?
What you meant, or if it was from other people that you got the concept that it was a tragic event.
Oh, the tragedy.
Beyond, obviously, the loss of life, but I didn't know if there was something specific.
No, I just, like I said, I've lived enough to know that when someone passes away, no matter what circumstance, it's very hard. And when you have two families that are involved in a shooting like this, and there's a victim that dies, it's tragic for everyone involved, because one person may end up having to deal with the court system, and then of course you have the family of the victim that has to deal with the loss of that loved one. And going through death, I think, is extremely tragic. And you know, it changes your life.
And then the other perspective that you mentioned was that this was typical. What do you mean by that?
Here in the United States, African Americans have been, you know, ever since the time of slavery, since the Civil War ended through Jim Crow, if you look at the numbers, African Americans, especially African American males, they are killed at a much higher rate. The violence in the African American community is high. It's typical in this country that African Americans are going to lose their life through violence. So when I say typical, that's what I mean by typical.
Okay, so that one perspective is that the loss of a African American male's life can be seen by some as typical.
Correct.
Okay. Is that a perspective, and it sounds like that's just one that you have from your life experience, and we may talk about that at another point in this conversation. I'm focused right now on whether or not any of that came specifically from media coverage of this. It sounds like it's more personal, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to have you tell us about any media perspective that led towards that.
No, like you say, that's not something I picked up from the media coverage of this particular case. It's
Do you, I think that you said that you don't go on Facebook, is that correct? Or did you?
no, I don't tweet.
You don't tweet?
I don't do Twitter.
Okay.
Um,
Do you
and-
do you go on Facebook?
Yeah, the only Facebook I have is with my brothers and sisters,
Okay.
because you can't get in touch with them unless they do Facebook.
I have a couple of those myself.
Mhm.
I know what you're saying. But it's not a default position for you to go for news information?
No,
Have you ever had any Facebook posts regarding this event
no,
or read any that were on your Facebook?
no,
And any blogs or anything like that that
No.
you either read? There's some that you just go to as a matter of course?
no, not for news.
Okay. How about any, and this is within the context of where you might get other information, any social clubs or civic organizations that you belong to that you belong to and that have talked about this event at all?
No.
Okay. Have a moment, you want? Few other questions.
Okay.
It happens when you have other people with you. There was a comment that you had made during your questioning with Mr. De La Rionda, sort of early in it, when you said that the media reacted because something big happened. And I'm just wondering if you can explain that a bit more to me, how it was presented that was your view of it.
The event happened on February 26th. I did not hear about it in the media, and I don't know if the first place I heard about it was locally or nationally until March. When that uproar occurred, then that's when I remember seeing networks start covering it and there being a story on it.
Okay. I was focused also, or most particularly on when you said something big happened.
Mhm.
At one point you said, in another part, in answer to a question, that, and maybe it was just, sometimes this is perceived to be typical, sometimes it's tragic, and then I was curious what it was in the media that finally presented it to you that way.
I would say the fact that the news media covered the story. If I remember correctly, during that time in the city of Chicago, there had been numbers of murders that did not receive nearly the same national attention as this particular case. Sort of makes this case different than what we typically have in the African American community when you have murders.
Okay, and do you think that that was in part that it was at least a perceived racial component to how it was handled by the media initially? Well, I'm sorry, handled by the authorities even, and then reported by the media.
That I can't answer. Why?
Yeah, and again, more than asking for, I'm more curious at this point of whether or not you got that from the media. You may have your own opinions about it, and we'll talk about that another time, but
Correct.
did the way the media presented it suggest that it was mishandled by the authorities, for example?
At first they did. I think that's how they tried to portray it, that something went on in Sanford that doesn't typically happen here in Florida.
Okay. How did you absorb that information from the media? Did that seem to conflict with your predispositions about the way Sanford would handle an event like this, or fall in line with it?
It's the first time I had heard of something or a situation that Sanford had to handle, because typically I'll hear about different crimes, different perceived crimes in Sanford, but so far as the local media getting in depth about that or following up, I had never heard anything before.
Okay. Throughout the media exposure that you've had you heard anything about George Zimmerman's background?
The fact that he lived in that complex, that he would think that he was part of a neighborhood watch organization in that complex. It's the only thing that I can recall.
Okay. Did the way the media presented his possible involvement in Neighborhood Watch cause you any concerns?
No.
And how about the background of Trayvon Martin? Did you hear anything about his background through the media, or actually even through your family members?
That he was a student that was up. I think he was visiting his dad during All-Star Weekend. Other than that, I don't recall anything that I've heard.
That was it?
Yes.
And though you've obviously been advised not to do so in the past week, had you been generally keeping up with this case as other news items came up since it first started?
Just hearing in passing.
Okay. Whenever it might show up on whatever media outlets that you were viewing?
Local news.
Okay. Great, thanks very much for the time. Oh, I'm sorry. Within the of us talking, I didn't know if anything that I've said or anything that you were thinking about that Mr. DeLorean just said has brought up any other memories, brought up anything else to talk about in this concept of media saturation, media effect on you. Anything else that we haven't talked about? Anything you remembered about the case that we haven't gone over yet?
No.
Okay, well, this will be the last time. I promise I'm about to sit down. Anything else?
No, that's
Great,
it.
thanks for the time, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just a moment, and counsel, when you're ready, approach. Thank you very much, sir. If you'll follow Corporal Demps. Thank you, sir. You may have a minute. Ready, Linda? Thank you.
Your Honor, G87.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. And you are being continued to be referred to as juror G87. Let me let you get comfortable. Comfortable? Okay, the attorneys are going to have an opportunity to ask you questions about the questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning, okay? And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Ronda.
Ladies and board, good afternoon, ma'am. As Judge Nelson indicated, we're going to be asking you some questions just limited to the publicity aspect of it or what you filled out in the questionnaire. You've got on here, let me make sure I read it correctly, that you work, I'm not going to name this school, but you work at a school.
Yes.
And probably shouldn't have even read that part, but anyway, that you heard about it on the news, is that correct?
Yeah, yes. Well, yeah,
Okay, all right. The other thing is when I'm asking you questions and when Mr. West is asking questions, we know that when we communicate with people, we nod our heads and shake, but this
Okay.
lady here needs to take everything down in terms
Yes,
of
sir.
yes or no answer or whatever.
Yes, sir.
Okay? I know we normally do that.
Okay.
Let's talk about the news aspect of it. Did you hear about it from TV or newspaper, internet, Twitter, or whatever? Where did you hear about it from?
At work.
At work, okay. And is that, when you first heard about it, was at work?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you subsequently follow the story in the newspaper or on TV?
That day, I followed up because I followed
Sure.
up by.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm trying not to, where you specifically work.
Right.
Okay. But it'd be fair to say that you work near where that happened?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's talk about, you heard about it because of where you work, and then did you subsequently keep following it as it progressed through the court system?
No, sir, I didn't. I work 2 jobs,
Okay.
and I'm typically gone at 7:30 in the morning, and I don't get home till 7 at night, and I'm in bed by 8. So the little TV I do watch, I watch maybe a little bit of the weather and.
Okay. In terms of what you recall hearing about the case, what do you remember? Do you remember any, I'll prod your hopefully
Okay.
remember. Do you remember looking at any photographs? Or
Yes.
hearing about photographs? What do
Yes.
you remember? What photographs, what were they of?
The back of Mr. Zimmerman's head.
Okay. Any other photographs that you can recall?
No.
Okay. And when you say the back of his head, can you be a little bit more descriptive?
There were cuts on the back of his head.
Did you come to any conclusions as a result of seeing that photograph?
No.
Okay. Have you heard anything in terms of whether there are any kind of recordings of any type in this case?
Have I heard any recordings?
Yeah, or have you heard or in the news about any recording?
I recall hearing the 911 call.
Okay. All right. Did you actually listen to the recording itself?
No, I just, in passing, I
Sure.
heard it.
And when we say the 911, what are we talking about? What do you remember at least?
The initial 911 call that was made.
And was that, do you recall any particulars about that recording itself? What was depicted or what was said in the recording?
I do remember.
Okay, what do you remember?
I just remember somebody saying help.
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of that?
Someone was in distress.
Okay, all right. Did you know whether it was one person, 2 people talking, or who it was?
No.
Okay. Did you subsequently, from the news, obtain any information in terms of who that possibly was, whether it was one or two people, or?
No,
Okay. So you got the summons to come to jury,
yes.
and that was about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Mhm.
Did you then figure out, oh, there may be, what kind of trials are going on in court? Did you do any research at all in terms of?
I didn't do any research.
And I know you have followed the judge's admonitions about not, but prior to coming to court, did you talk to anybody about what potentially you would be a juror on in terms of what kind of cases?
I said that I was going to be in the jury, I was going to be a juror, and it was my first time ever at jury duty.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
Have you enjoyed it so far?
It's been spectacular.
Okay. You know, it's nice to, I guess, laugh a little bit in terms of the system, but we are all, I would submit, and I don't know if you would agree, it's a privilege to live in this country. And it's a privilege to partake in the system. We're used to it as attorneys, and so is the judge, but we ask people to come from their everyday jobs and lives, and we ask them to sit as jurors, and we really don't expect people to be that educated in terms of the law. We just expect them to listen to the evidence and make a decision based on what happens. And I gather from your answers that you have not formulated an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant, Mrs. Zimmerman, is that
No,
correct?
sir, I was not there.
Okay. So, let me backtrack a second in terms of the media. Do you believe the media always gets things right when they report something?
No, I think the media usually blows things out of proportion.
Do you also believe that sometimes the media, or aspects of the media, a certain part, sometimes that there's also commentary besides just straight news? In terms of people's
Absolutely.
opinion? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, do I believe that happens?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, how does one, if one is exposed to such opinions or biases or commentary, how is one able to make a decision, as we're asking you to do if you're a juror, if you've been exposed to that? What would you do? Would you try to, like, I know you can't go into your brain and take it out, but I mean,
Right.
can you agree, I guess, to, in making a decision to disregard that? What you've been
Well,
exposed to?
I just feel like I wasn't present at the location. I wasn't, a part of it, and therefore, it's not something that I can make a judgment about.
So you agree that sometimes the media either incorrectly states what happened or what people say happened, right?
Potentially.
Okay. And so you would agree that in making a decision, you can't rely on what was brought out of the media?
Can you repeat that?
Would you agree that in making a decision, if you're picked as a juror, that you cannot rely on what was brought out of the media?
Yes, sir.
Is there any doubt in your mind about that?
No.
Okay. Did you also talk to people where you work at about what had happened?
Things were said at
Okay.
where I work because we were told not to talk about it.
Right, okay. So even though you were told not to talk about it, people did talk?
Well, I'm talking about we were told to, as,
You and I think, are being very careful in not describing where you work, and please maintain that. Because we're trying to keep you anonymous in terms of calling you G87. Let me see if I can ask it this way, so
Okay.
you know where I'm coming from. We know you work near there.
yes.
Okay. Have you been exposed to some commentary by people where you work that have talked about the case?
Certainly.
Okay. And have they expressed your opinions about what happened?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did any of the people that expressed their opinions, did any of them say they were actually eyewitnesses or that they lived where it happened? in the
No,
community?
sir.
Do you understand what I'm saying
Mhm.
is, you know where it happens, right?
Yes.
We'll call it, Trina Twin Lakes, it's a
Okay.
gated community.
Yes.
Did anybody where you work tell you that they lived in that community, is what I'm saying, that they had been eyewitnesses or anything?
No, sir.
So these were people at work that were just commenting
They
about
were
what they had
making an
heard?
opinion, yes.
That had opinions?
Yes.
And did they obtain that opinions by virtue of watching it on, something on TV?
I can't really say that they actually came out and said that they had a specific opinion about
Okay.
the guilt or innocence of anyone, but the actual case was discussed, if that
Okay,
makes
all right.
sense
Sure,
to you.
okay. What do you recall, and now you don't need to give me everything that they discussed, but what was the gist of the conversation from those people at work that told you about the case?
It was more general information about what had happened
Okay.
in the location.
Sure. And is that your main source of information about the case that you've been exposed to, that you found out? Because you mentioned you don't watch much TV.
I've seen it a little bit on Channel 13,
Okay.
but
Let's
Okay.
let me interrupt you if I could. What have you seen on Channel 13 about the case?
what I explained to you,
Okay, other than that, anything else?
no.
Okay. And how about from people at work? What have they told you about the case?
That there was a shooting across the street.
Okay, all right, okay. In terms of what they were telling you, okay. Did they obviously weren't witnesses to it, right?
No, sir.
Okay. And did they tell you that they did any research on the internet or anything about the facts of the case?
No, sir.
Okay.
Because as a whole, we really, as a whole, we tried not to talk about it.
Sure, okay. In terms of the case itself, do you remember anything related to the case that was not about the shooting itself? In terms of what was happening at the time around the shooting or after? Do you remember anything in terms of the Seminole County, anything going on that you remember that's related to the case that wasn't part of the shooting?
Okay, yes, I know that there were,
I can't ask you, I can't tell you what the facts are.
Okay.
I'm trying to find out from you what you know as best
okay,
I
I
can.
know that there were rallies.
Okay, what did you think of those rallies?
I thought, I'm not sure what I thought about them.
Okay, all right, and you can have no opinion about
Right.
that either. Did you think, do you believe in the concept of free speech? In
Yes,
terms of
sir.
people, do you think those people were biased one way or the other in terms of favoring Trayvon Martin or favoring George Zimmerman?
And the rallies?
Yes. What did you understand the rallies to be about?
I think that the rallies were about people wanting justice.
Okay. Did you think that was a bad thing or an improper thing that occurred in Seminole County?
No, sir.
Okay. Anything else that comes to mind regarding the rallies?
No.
Okay. Have you had any discussions about the case with family?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And has that been immediate family or?
And meet my husband.
Okay, all right. And has he expressed his opinion regarding the facts of the case, or has he told you, yeah, I actually went on the internet and I did some research on
No,
this?
he's not that kind of
Okay,
guy.
all right. And did he tell you he had seen it on TV or read the paper and, hey, these are some extra facts about the case?
No.
Okay. And how about with other family members? Anybody else has talked to you about the case?
No.
When your husband talked about the case, did he express his opinions about the guilt or innocence of Mr. Zimmerman?
No, we mostly talked about just the situation.
What do you mean by that?
Just that, that night,
Okay.
that two people were,
All right. Did you see any photographs related to Trayvon Martin at all?
I think I did.
Okay.
I
You
did.
remember what they were?
The only one I recall is one with a baseball cap on, I
Okay.
believe.
Did you come to any conclusions as a result of that?
No, sir.
Okay. Have you heard any people locally talking about the case? Disregard the rally right now. I'm talking about people that either attorneys or other individuals talking about the case, discussing the case. I'm not talking about commentators, about people who may have had a news conference about the case at all.
No, sir.
Okay. I'm gonna have a moment, Your Honor. Have you visited any websites dedicated to the case, either in favor of Trayvon Martin?
No,
or
sir.
in favor of George Zimmerman? Nothing at all?
No, sir.
Okay. If somebody came from out of town and said, oh, what's this George Zimmerman case about? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that there was an incident that happened between Mr. Zimmerman and a teenage boy.
Anything else you remember about the facts in terms of, you mentioned shooting, how the shooting came about or anything like that? Or
I
why it
don't,
occurred?
I don't know, have any idea about.
Okay, that's fine, I'm just asking you what you know.
Right.
Because we can't tell you what the facts are. I guess the bottom line is you would agree that you have to keep an open mind and listen to the evidence that actually comes out in court?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other subject matter I want to talk to you, man, is about one of the questions you were asked in terms of whether you could dedicate time.
Yes, sir.
We realize that serving as a jury is a hardship,
Sure.
just by general, because you know. But in order for our system of justice to work, we ask people to take some time from their everyday lives. And the judge made a determination. First of all, we're estimating it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
And the court has also made a determination just in terms of the media not exposing or not interfering with the process. And what I mean by that is that the jurors make their decision only on what happens in the courtroom as opposed to being exposed to something else.
Okay.
That the jury is going to be sequestered.
Okay.
And that means that your contact with family and other stuff is going to be curtailed.
Okay.
You know, it's unlimited, but it has to be, she'll make the decision in terms of the criteria, but I want to make sure you're aware of that. And the question is, we realize that people in serving as jurors is a burden already, but the question is, beyond that, is this an insurmountable burden? In other words, do you have plans to be out of town for 3 months or whatever?
No, sir.
So you can dedicate the time basically to serve as a
Yes,
juror?
sir.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Thank you. Mr. West?
Hi. My name is Don West, one of the attorneys for Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay.
And this is Mark O'Mara,
Okay.
George Zimmerman on the end, and Robert Hirschhorn in the
Okay.
middle. Okay?
Okay.
Did you know you were going to be sitting in a chair all by yourself in front of all these people?
No, sir.
Take a deep breath if you want.
I'm trying.
Okay. If I say anything to you that you don't understand what I'm getting at, and I have a tendency to run on compound questions.
Okay.
Now, just say so.
Okay.
This isn't a test for you to figure out what we're talking
Okay.
about. Okay. There's no right answer in the sense that we're not asking about facts. We're just asking about what you've heard, what you know about in connection with the case, and how it may have affected you in some way coming in.
Okay.
Everybody that we've talked to so far has heard something.
Mm-hmm.
Some more, some less. So we're just trying to sort that.
Okay.
Okay? Let's talk about some really easy stuff at first. Where you work in proximity to where this event took place.
Okay.
Pardon me?
May I?
I think that's as far as it's going.
Okay.
It's as close as it'll be. Just a consideration.
Okay.
Looks like y'all straightened that out.
Yes. Geographically, it's close.
Yes, sir. It's a-
Okay. On your way to work? Or
Yes,
back-
sir.
Back from work, do you see this community?
Yes.
Can you see it from where you work?
Yes.
Okay. Have you seen any memorials or?
Yes,
any-
sir.
Describe that for me.
There were bears and balloons on a stop sign, a makeshift memorial.
Mhm. What did you make of that?
I thought it was tragic that, you know, that somebody had died, but I didn't really make anything of it.
Well, that's, you
Is
thought
it-
what you saw, the way it impressed you, was just the fact that life was lost?
Mhm.
Did you take it to mean that that was a side, that someone was taking sides by creating the memorial as opposed to just a tribute?
I saw it more as a tribute,
Um,
because I saw people were dropped off in buses to go to the memorial.
Oh, did you see that from work?
Yes.
Tell me about that a little.
There were tour buses that came and dropped people off, and they went and stood around the memorial. So I saw it more as not as taking sides, but as a tribute.
Do you have any idea where the tour buses were from?
I have no idea.
Any sense of whether,
I know that they were asked to leave.
okay, do you know anything about that? Who may have asked them to leave, or why they were brought there to start with?
No, I mean, I know that my boss asked them to leave because they were on the property.
The people or the buses or
Both.
Both. So as people would come in buses to see, well, let me be more clear. Do you think the people in the buses were coming to see the memorial or something more than that?
The memorial?
Okay. Not necessarily the community itself?
No, sir.
And you have a memory of your boss saying that they can't park here or they can't assemble in the...
Yes, sir. Well, I heard that was what happened.
Uh-huh. Okay. Was that of some concern then to your employment, that people were there in the parking lot?
No,
or
sir.
Why were they asked to leave then?
Oh, why? I thought you said of my employment.
No, no.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Why were they asked to leave? Do you know?
Why were they asked to leave? Because they were, they had no business at the location. Am I
Sure. May I have it just a minute, please? Bench briefly.
Juror G87, don't know how to put, just follow Deputy Dents back into the room. No. Thank you very much for your patience and time. Can we have our next juror, please? Please be seated. Good afternoon. And you are being referred to and will continue to be referred to as Juror H6. And you're being questioned today by the attorneys regarding your questionnaire that you filled out on Tuesday morning, okay? And we're going to begin with Mr. De La Runa.
Please support.
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
This part of the process, we're just limited to questions about what you know about the case from the media. You understand? I know you filled out the questionnaire. I've got here that you heard that news reports throughout the year about this case, but have not paid much attention to them. I don't know that it is self-defense because I don't know much about the details. Is that in a nutshell what you know or don't know?
Correct. I didn't really hear much of the details on it. I've just heard little bits of it here and there.
Okay. Let's start at the very beginning in terms of your exposure from the media aspect. Was it on TV?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was it local news and national news, or just local or just national?
It was a combination of the both.
Okay. Do you recall what channels or what stations you would have picked up locally that would have informed you about this case?
I listened to, I think it's NBC in the morning.
Okay. And then how about national?
CNN.
Okay. And any other sources other than TV? Newspaper is what I'm asking.
I don't have any papers delivered.
Okay. And how about online? Sometimes we get the newspaper, or people read the newspaper online.
Occasionally I visit the CF News 13.
Okay.
Yeah. And also CNN as well.
Okay. Do you do any kind of like through Facebook or anything like that, where apparently there's news feeds?
I'm on Facebook, but it's once a week if I get on it.
And did you follow, you mentioned here you followed the case, I guess, from the beginning or close to the beginning of back in February of last year throughout the year?
When it first happened, I watched the news reports, but after that I just kind of trailed off. And
Sure. What do you remember when you first heard about the case on TV? What do you remember about the case? What facts do you remember, if any?
I heard the 911 call, I think, that was released.
Okay.
I heard a lot around the stand your ground law that was going on.
Okay?
I don't really remember any specifics though.
Sure. The 911 call, do you remember what the call captured, what the call was about?
It was about hearing someone screaming in the background.
Okay. And did you make any conclusions as to whether it was one or two people, who it was?
Honestly, I couldn't tell.
Okay. Besides actually listening to the call, did you hear any commentary about the call, who it was or who it wasn't?
I've heard a few things, but
Okay.
I don't really remember what they were.
Okay.
I remember hearing someone saying that they didn't recognize the voice, but I don't remember who it was that said that.
Okay. And have you heard anything recently about that 911 call?
No,
If
sir.
there was anything recent? So your knowledge about the facts would have been at the very beginning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall in your viewing on TV coming across any photographs related to the case or any aspect of the case?
I don't recall seeing any photographs.
Okay. Any other recordings other than the 911 recording? And I'm not saying that there is, I'm just saying, do you recall anything else?
I don't recall anything
Okay.
else.
Do you remember anybody being interviewed about the case, either from Mr. Zimmerman's side or Trayvon Martin's side or any of the attorneys, anything like that?
I know I've heard the families being interviewed. I don't remember what they were.
Okay.
And I've also heard on the radio his brother as well,
Okay. His brother being?
Mr. Zimmerman's.
Okay. And do you recall when you heard Mr. Zimmerman's brother on the radio?
I remember it was on Real Radio. I don't remember when. Maybe 2-3 months ago, maybe longer.
Okay. Do you remember what he said on the radio?
I don't.
Okay. At the time that it was said that you heard his brother, did it form an impression on you in terms of, oh, he's right or he's wrong, or I wonder what that's about, or anything like that? Any thought process that you went through when you heard it?
Not really. It's just something I listened to while driving home from work
Did
or
you
to work.
Did you form an opinion as a result of hearing his brother on the radio?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you mention any other family member or not, or any other persons on TV or on the radio?
I vaguely remember maybe hearing from the victims' families.
Okay.
Or-
Anything about the victim's family, Trayvon Martin's family that impacted you one way or the other to favor that side versus another?
No, sir. I don't remember any of it.
Okay. You've obviously put in your questionnaire that you have not formed an opinion as to the guilt or innocence of this defendant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is that still accurate? I know you did this back on the 11th, and I think we're on the 14th. I know you haven't been exposed to any media because you've admonished, but have you thought about it some more and thinking, oh, maybe I'm not accurate, or do you still feel the same way?
I still feel the same way.
Okay. What else do you recall in terms of facts, in terms of your knowledge based on the media exposure you've had? Probably that's the wrong term. In terms of just watching TV, what else do you recall about the case? Any other facts?
I also remember hearing the 911 call that Mr. Zimmerman had made.
Okay.
I don't really remember the details of it.
So you don't know any of the specifics about what actually, you heard it at the time, but you don't remember it now?
Right, I just remember hearing him say something like there was someone suspicious in the neighborhood and
Okay. Did that form an impression on you one way or the other as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant?
not really, no.
Okay. Do you remember anything related to the case that's not like the factual things of what happened? Anything related to the case or to the community that's arose as a result of the case in the news? Do you remember anything related to what's going on at all?
No, I just remember people talking about the stand your ground defense and gun laws in general after
Okay.
it.
And when you say people, are those like friends or just people at work or a combination of?
Combination of, and also people discussing it on the news. And
Okay. Did you come to any conclusions as a result of, let me break that down. In terms of conversations with friends, did they express opinions about whether this was stand your ground or not?
be honest, I didn't know because I was kind of curious on it, but
Sure.
I hadn't heard all the facts, and
Okay,
I know until you know everything, you
Sure.
really don't know.
sure. Based on discussions that the people, friends, that they express an opinion about whether it was stand your ground, not what you believe, but what did they give you an opinion? Yeah, it's stand your ground, or no, it isn't, or?
I'm sure I have friends that went one way or the other, but I don't really remember their opinions on it.
And how about with family? Any discussions with family about any details of the case?
No, we didn't really talk about it.
Okay. Did you watch any of the court proceedings regarding this case?
No, sir.
Okay. You got the summons, which was about 3-4 weeks ago. Did you then, let me find out what's going on in the community so I can be a better person in terms of knowing some facts about the case? Did you do any research about any of the cases that were happening?
No, sir. I just marked it on my calendar.
Okay. You mentioned self-defense in terms of, why did you mention self-defense in your written statement here? Why did you write self-defense in terms of?
Because I had heard a bit on the radio that they were talking about might be a self-defense defense.
Okay.
Just because I heard that maybe the victim had attacked him first.
Okay. And do you remember who on the radio said that? Was that his brother that said that, or was that somebody else? When I say his brother, I'm talking about George Zimmerman's brother that you heard on the radio, or was that somebody else?
It was probably someone else. I believe I might have heard it from the Monsters in the Morning.
Okay. And did they express an opinion in terms of what was going on, whether that was accurate or not?
Not really that I know of.
Okay. Do you feel the media aspect of this case was slanting it one way or the other, or biased one way or the other, either in favor of George Zimmerman or in favor of Trayvon Martin?
I think most of the media was slanted towards Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Was that at all times, or just only at the beginning, or at the end, or throughout the case?
At the beginning, I know it was all slanted towards Trayvon. Near the end now, I feel it's kind of balanced out.
Okay. You agree then that the media can be biased or has been biased in this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you think it's a good thing, bad thing? Or it's just their right to do that?
I mean, it's their right to do it, but I think it's not a good thing.
Okay, why is that?
If they don't have all the facts, it's really hard to get a good judgment on it, and they're just spinning their own agenda towards it.
Okay. And sometimes the media is just straight facts. You know, a car going down the street sometimes is facts and opinion. And then sometimes you also have now a new phenomenon, well, it's not new, it's been for a while, where you have commentators commenting about the facts. Were you exposed to commentators commenting about the facts, you know, like legal experts or an expert regarding whatever, talking about what's really this means or not mean?
I'm sure there was, but I don't remember any off the top of my head.
Okay, nothing comes to mind in terms of, yeah, I remember this attorney saying this about the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you recall whether you heard any of the attorneys locally talking about the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you recall whether any attorneys involved in this case, did you hear them make any news conference or comments about the case?
No, sir.
Okay. Nobody comes to mind at all? I'm not saying that it did, nothing comes to mind.
No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay. If you could, somebody was coming out of town, somebody came into town that you knew, and they said, what's this all about George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that it was a neighborhood watch that saw someone suspicious in their neighborhood, called the police, and then went to follow them. And there was a confrontation, and Trayvon got shot and killed. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. And if they asked you, well, what did you think about that? What would you tell them?
I really don't know.
Okay. let's assume you're picked as a juror, you're listening to the evidence, and what the witness says out of that stand contradicts something that you heard on TV, somebody commenting about the case, or just a newscaster telling you these are facts, or something you actually saw. Which one would you rely on? What happens in court, what the witness says, or what you remember from the news?
What the witness said.
And why is that?
Well, they were there and saw what happened, and I mean, I believe what they said over the news media that sometimes slants it to fit their agenda.
So at this time, do you know whether it's self-defense or not? And the reason you mentioned self-defense, have you formed an opinion as to whether it is or not?
I have not.
Okay. Any other details that you can remember at this time about what happened there? I shouldn't say what happened because you weren't a witness. I'm talking about what the media has said happened.
Nothing that comes to mind.
Okay. The other aspect that I want to ask you about, or the other issue is, we ask people to come and serve as citizens. And we realize that that takes time from their everyday lives, from their families, from work. But that's the only way our system works, is to ask people to come. And that means that they're going to have to spend some time away from family and friends, and also work. We have estimated that this case may take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. Once we get actually a jury, and we're still going through that process, as you know. There's also been a determination that the jury will be sequestered, which means, in terms of making sure that the jury makes a decision only on what actually happens in the courtroom as opposed to being exposed to something else, that your interaction with other people, family, friends, etc., will be severely curtailed. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Have you thought about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you foresee that, we realize it's a hardship for anybody, but the question is whether it's an insurmountable hardship to you.
No, sir, it's not.
Are you one of those people that said, man, this is my opportunity to get on the limelight, and you realize that the TV is not taking your picture, but some people think, this is my opportunity. After this case is over with, I can be on national TV and I can go all over the world talking about this case that I was a juror. Are you one of those people that thinks that you want to do that? Have you thought about that?
I don't like TV cameras.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Thank you, Mr. O'Mara.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mark O'Mara. I represent George Zimmerman, who's in the middle, and then Donald West on the far side is my co-counsel Robert Hirschhorn, who is helping us out as well. As was apparent from Mr. De Leon's questions, this part of the process is just to see what it was you knew about the case beforehand, how you sort of absorbed that and reacted to it, and how that might affect your ability to be a juror. So that's what I'm sort of going to be focusing on, okay? And basically your information comes from local TV, is that the most part?
Yes,
Some
sir.
national?
Yes, sir.
And your local TV stations, did you say 13?
I did watch CF News 13 and also, I believe it's NBC, Channel 2.
Any others locally?
Not really.
And national, I know you mentioned CNN. Any others nationally?
Not really.
And you also mentioned Monsters in the Morning?
Yes.
Monsters of the Morning?
Yeah, Monsters in the Morning on
Yeah.
Real Radio.
104.1?
Yes, sir.
What's their take on this case?
I think depending on who's on the channel, it's a little different, but I haven't gotten any real feel of any of them leaning one way or the other.
Okay, you ever listen to Jim Phillips on 104.1?
On my way home, yes, sir.
Okay. What is his take on this event?
Usually when I'm listening to his program, it's more at the end of it when they're doing their game shows.
Okay. Have you ever heard Jim Phillips, I'm sorry, talk about the Trayvon Martin case on his show?
I may have, but I don't recall it.
Okay. You did acknowledge that the media in this case has been biased, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Towards Trayvon Martin?
Yes, sir.
Any idea why?
I feel a big part of it at the beginning had to deal with race.
What do you mean by that?
When everyone was saying that it was a white man that had gunned down a black man.
Okay. How did that show itself through the media?
A lot of people protesting, and I think I heard Al Sharpton at one time talking about it. I'm not sure.
Okay. How did all of that media, and to the extent that they were biased, the media bias, affect you and your opinion?
At first, I thought maybe they were right, but at the beginning when I started hearing more and more come out, I started to question whether it was being slanted or not.
Do you agree that first impressions are sometimes they last the longest?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Do you think that they might, with you in this case, having had the first impression of the media bias in favor of the Trayvon Martin side of things, do you think that might have an effect on you?
No, sir.
You think it's fair to George Zimmerman that the media had that bias against him?
No, sir.
Why not?
If they didn't have all the facts to begin with, they were running with what they had to try to get ratings.
In light of those first information flow that sort of flowed over you as well as everybody else, how have you handled trying to moderate what you listen to or get a better understanding of what may have happened?
I didn't really pay attention to it that much. I was more interested in other world events going on. And I've been busy a lot with work and just haven't paid attention much to the news except for what's on in the morning.
Okay. You said that you noticed lately you thought the media went from opposed to George's side to a little bit more even-handed.
I'm just going to object to reference to George as opposed to Mr.
George.
Zimmerman.
I'll rephrase it. I think you said that the media initially was opposed to George Zimmerman's side, and then it moderated more. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Okay. How had that shown itself to you?
It made me really wonder what really happened and what the facts really were.
What information came out that you consider to be more moderated or more towards the middle?
I haven't seen pictures, but I heard about pictures out there showing that Mr. Zimmerman had some injuries on himself as well. And that made me wonder if the story was skewed to begin with, and that that it was more of a self-defense instead of an attack.
What pictures are you speaking of?
I heard of pictures of Mr. Zimmerman's face having bruises and maybe some cuts on him. I don't remember. But I never saw the pictures for myself. I never bothered to look them up online.
Who'd you hear that from?
I do not recall. It could have been on the radio, because since I didn't see the pictures, it's...
I'm just curious, more than even who it was it anyone that you would defer your opinion to?
No.
And I was curious because you had said that in response to a question by Mr. Dillarionda that you didn't know if it was a self-defense matter or not.
Correct. Since
Okay.
I never saw the pictures for myself, I don't know what they entailed.
Okay. And you don't have any facts either way on the issue of self-defense yet, or do you?
Correct, I do not.
Have you made any opinion that a crime even occurred at all?
That I don't know.
I did notice that on a couple of occasions that in referencing Trayvon Martin that you identified him as the victim. Are you speaking simply victim of the fact that he was shot and is now dead, or does victim mean to you something in relation to whether or not a crime occurred?
A victim in the term that he was shot and killed.
Have you made any determination as you sit here today whether or not Trayvon Martin is a victim of a crime or just an event?
I don't know either way right now. I don't know what happened that night.
Okay. Do you understand my concern over the slight difference in perspective on that?
Yes, sir.
So let's say that you now are picked on the jury, you're now heard all the cases, and you're back in the jury room deliberating, and some other juror presents to you some of the same information from this media bias that you're aware of. So they come back and say, well, I remember hearing this, or I remember hearing about that. I just remember that the groundswell was against George Zimmerman, and there's got to be something behind that. How would you react to that?
I try not to believe things other people told me unless I've seen it for myself. And if it's something I wasn't presented, I just feel maybe they were mistaken in their memories.
The judge will instruct you that, and the sole purpose, or the primary purpose of our inquiry here is to make sure that whatever you heard outside the courtroom stays out of the courtroom, and you only decide the case on what you hear inside the courtroom. Can you commit to doing that?
Yes, sir.
Can you commit to keeping every other juror, should you be on the jury panel, to doing the same and nothing more?
I can't control what they do, but I can disregard anything that they tell me that I haven't heard in the courtroom.
And take on reminding them of the judge's instructions that they only decide the case on what they hear in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
You said that your friends sort of had opinions in this one way or the other. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I don't really remember any details of it. I just remember hearing people talking about the Stand Your Ground law and just gun ownership in general.
Okay. Did they seem to have opinions based upon what they heard in the media, or are these more their general opinions about these issues?
I think it was more of the general opinions about the issues. It just gave them something to talk about it with.
Did any of those opinions then sort of influence or override your opinion on some of what we've been talking about?
No, sir.
And through the media, both way in the beginning when it was, in your words, sort of slanted, and through the time, through today, have you heard anything about George Zimmerman's background, where he was from, or anything like that, through the media?
I've heard that he has a Hispanic father, and that's all.
Okay. Anything else that you can think of?
Nothing else I can think of.
And how about with Trayvon Martin? Anything about his background that you can recall having heard about through the media?
I think that he was just visiting one of his parents in this area, or I really don't remember.
Okay. Anything else about that visit or anything else about Trayvon Martin at all that you recall?
I think he's just visiting, I think it was his dad, that he lived with his girlfriend or something in this area.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
And if I were to end today just asking you to tell me the three most significant facets of this case that you remember, what would they be?
Well, the one part I heard the most of was Stand Your Ground, and that was everywhere. Probably the 911 call, and I'm not sure what the other one would be.
The 911 call, you said you did listen to it?
I listened to, I heard one from someone that was in the neighborhood, and then the one that Mr. Zimmerman replaced himself. I don't remember any details of them. It was probably close to right after it happened when I had heard them, and I haven't listened to them since.
Of the two calls, one was the call that George Zimmerman placed himself, correct?
Correct.
And then the other one was of a resident.
Correct.
Talk for a moment about the one that George Zimmerman placed himself, though you don't, maybe not have specific memory. Was there anything when you listened to the tape that you thought was that he was either acting improperly or properly? When you were listening to the tape the first time, what did you come away from it with?
He sounded like he was concerned about his neighborhood.
And in the 911 call, sorry, the second call placed by the resident, was there anything particular that you remember that was significant about that call?
All I remember from that one is there was someone screaming in the background, and no one could tell who it was.
And you had mentioned in response to Mr. De Leon's questions about your ability to be with us for a few weeks if need be. I think you said that you had no conflicts or any problems. You would be able to stay with us. The trial may last a couple of weeks, as many as 4 potentially. Is that a concern at all with your scheduling?
Well, the only concern with scheduling is I have to close on my house coming up on the 28th, but I don't know if that would be a conflict in the schedule because I don't know when it's going to begin.
That's some hour or a couple of hour event that just might need
Correct.
to be addressed. Anything else besides that?
Just missing work, but besides that, I mean, I've traveled a lot with previous jobs where I've had to been away from family for a while.
Okay. And similarly, the court has indicated the jury will be sequestered, meaning that you'll be spending the nights away from the home at all. That's something that, though maybe an intrusion or inconvenience, you can accomplish and address.
Yes, sir.
Great. Your Thank you. No further questions. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. If you'll remain seated for just a moment, attorneys, counsel, when you're ready, please approach.